Hello, I'm Mrs. Jansen, and today we're going to draw a folk art landscape. Our artwork today is influenced by contemporary folk artist Heather Galler from New York. Contemporary means happening right now in the present. Folk art is a type of art that looks different than real life. It is often very colorful. People who create folk art often live in the community they show in their artwork. So when we look at Heather Galler's artwork, we can think about the community that this artist lives in. Notice on the left, this artist shows houses. On the right, we see a farm. Notice how this artist has showed hills or land in both of the works of art, and instead of it looking like real life, this artist has used bright colors, lines, and shapes. The lines, shapes, and colors create patterns. Landscape is a picture that shows a natural scene of land or the countryside. On the left, we see hills or mountains that look very much like real life and might remind you of where we live. On the right, we see a desert landscape that also might remind you of the landscape that we would see where we live. You'll notice on the right that this artist added some colors that we don't see in real life to the landscape. Our next vocabulary word is pattern. Repeated art elements like lines, colors, and shapes create patterns. Let's look at the examples on the left and notice that we see a lot of geometric shapes and we also see colors. I'd like you to look at these patterns, and the shape has been given to you, but I'd like you to follow the pattern with your eyes to determine what color would fill the next empty shape. And then I'd like you to determine what color would fill the last empty shape in the pattern. On the right, you see another example of patterns, and this is similar to what our artwork might look like today. We're going to be creating a hill and adding a lot of our own ideas to create patterns. So you'll see my screen change so that we can draw together. Please have your paper, pencil, and crayons ready. So we're creating a landscape today, so our paper needs to be landscape style, horizontal or across. The first thing we're going to do is think about that hillside. And as we look at our paper, I'd like you to go from the bottom left and place your finger about in the middle of the paper. Here we're going to create the hill. So we're going to start with a curved line that might remind you of a rainbow. And then we're going to add to it with another curved line similar to a rainbow and a third one. So now we've got the top of our hill drawn, and even though we were all drawing the same type of line, remember, everyone's looks different. Now we're going to divide this hillside into sections, and we're going to use vertical lines first. So where the curved line went down, place a vertical line that goes from that curved line to the bottom of your paper. And then let's look at that curved line that we drew, and where it goes down again, add a second vertical line. So now this hill is divided into 3 large sections, and we want to look inside each section and add 2 diagonal lines to it to create more sections. So I'm going to go to the first section, and you can add 2 diagonal lines, and they don't have to look exactly like mine do. And now we're going to go to the second section, and you can add 2 more diagonal lines in this one. And again, as you create art, you make choices, so your diagonal lines don't have to look exactly like mine do. Let's go to the last section of the hill, and let's add 2 more diagonal lines. So now we have a lot of sections on our hillside. Now we're ready to make another choice. Would you like to show a barn on top of the hill, or would you rather show a farmhouse? Decide what you'd like to draw, and we're going to start together drawing. I'm going to draw a barn, but if you've decided to draw a house, you're going to draw it differently. So you'll see that I'm going to start with a simple shape. It's a rectangle, but I only have to draw 3 sides because the 4th side is covered by the hill. On top of the rectangle, I'm going to add a triangle. And notice how I only had to draw 2 sides. Now I'm going to decide how large my barn is. So I'm going to add a rectangle with a horizontal line and a vertical line. Notice how I only had to draw 2 sides of that rectangle. I didn't have to draw this side because it's covered by the hill, and this rectangle shares the line with the first rectangle we drew. Now I'm going to add to the roof. I'm going to go to the top of the triangle and add a horizontal line, and at the end of that line, I'm going to add a diagonal line. Now I know that a farmer uses large equipment like a tractor, and sometimes the farmer needs to bring the tractor into the barn. So I'm going to add a large rectangle, which will be a door large enough that this farmer could enter the barn with a tractor. And then I know the door has to open, so I'm going to add a vertical line. And then I'm going to add 2 diagonal lines that look a lot like an X on top. And that is just a design, a line design or a pattern. But sometimes we see barn doors with an X. You get to decide what you place on your doors. And at the top, I'm going to add a small rectangle because I know at the top of the barn, a farmer often stores hay for their animals, and they need this little door at the top so that they can put the hay inside. Well, now that I've got the barn drawn, I'm going to decide what I'd like to do with the roof. I think I'm going to add diagonal lines. And I think I'll add some horizontal lines. And now I think I'm going to add more horizontal lines to the side of the barn. Remember, you're making your own choices, and everybody's art is going to look different. So for now, I'm finished with the barn, and I think I'd like to draw what's called a silo. This is something separate that the farmer stores food in for the animals. So I'm going to start with a rectangle. I only have to draw 3 sides because one side is covered because of the hill. And on top of the rectangle, I'm going to add what's called a semicircle, or a curved line like a rainbow. So now I'm going to decide how many trees I'd like to grow on top of the hill. I'm going to start with the bottom of the tree. I'm going to add 2 vertical lines, and you can use different lines and shapes. Remember, these don't have to look exactly like they look in real life. And I think I'm going to use a curly line, or that loop-de-loop line, to form a tree. And we know that trees don't look like this in real life, but we can use different lines and shapes in folk art. I'm thinking I'd like this tree to have apples, so if you'd like to add any fruit to your trees, you can do that. You don't have to. And I want to show the texture of tree bark, so I'm going to add some vertical dashed lines that don't line up like the lines on a street. I'd like another tree, but this time I'd like this one to be different. I'm going to add a shape that might remind you of a triangle. But remember, I only have to draw 2 sides because that third side is covered by the hillside. I'm going to draw the top of the tree with a curved line, and when I come to something I've already drawn, I'm going to remember to pick up my pencil. And now I'm going to go inside the shape of the tree, and I'm going to add some more curved lines. I'm going to add branches that look very different than real life. I'd like to add texture on this tree trunk as well, so I'm going to add different marks and lines for texture. And because I picked my pencil up, it's called a dash line, but it looks very different than the dash on the street. So now I'd like you to look at this space and decide if you'd like another tree. It's up to you. You can decide probably 2 or 3 trees would be best. I think I'm going to make a third tree, and I'm going to add 2 vertical lines. This looks a lot like a rectangle, similar to the first one, but smaller. I'm going to add that texture with those dashed lines on the tree trunk. This time I'm going to add a wavy line, and I'd like this tree to be smaller than the others. And I remembered to pick up my pencil when I came to something I drew. Inside this tree, I'm going to show branches, and I'm going to add a straight vertical line and a diagonal line, and more diagonal lines off of that one. I'm going to add another diagonal line and add smaller ones. And branches look very different on different trees. And remember, they don't have to look like they look in real life. I've got more choices to make. Would I like to add any other plants or flowers growing? I think I'm going to add a small bush next to the barn. I'm going to just add a wavy line, and inside it, I'm going to add curved lines like smiles, and when they're connected, they're called scalloped lines. And I think I'd like to add flowers. They don't have to look like real life, so I'm going to add them larger than they would be. I'm going to draw them a little bit larger than the bush. And flowers can look different. They don't have to be the same. And they don't have to look exactly like they look in real life. So now you get to decide, what type of day is it? Is it a sunny day? Is it a windy day? Are there any clouds in the sky? You don't have to show the sun if you don't want to, but if you'd like to, you can. So you get to decide where you place it in the sky. I'm going to add the sun almost in the center. I think I'm going to have a nice, bright, sunny day. And I'm going to add a line, a spiral line inside the sun, and some smaller lines around it for the sun rays. I think I'm going to add one cloud, and this cloud is going to be floating in the sky, so I'm going to add it with wavy lines. And then inside the cloud, I think I'm going to add some spirals so that this looks very different than clouds look in real life, in different shapes. I think I'm going to add another cloud that looks different than the first one I drew. So remember, as we're drawing together, these are just idea starters, and you get to add your own ideas. I think I'd like to show birds flying, and I'm going to add birds with a line that's curved, two of them, that meets in the center, and then I want it to look like it's flying. So I'm just going to add the curved lines that look like the wings, this little circle that looks more like the bird's body. And I'm going to add another one, a little bit smaller. And now that we've got our farm or farmhouse drawn, the trees, anything else growing on top of the hill drawn, and the sky, now we can go to our hillside. And this is where you can really use your imagination. I'm going to show you an example for idea starters. So you can use all different types of lines and shapes, and they can be different sizes. And then you can color them. You're going to notice that these lines look a lot thicker because this is black crayon. So what you want to do, here's another example, is you want to color everything first, and then you'll go back over your pencil lines with black crayon on the hillside or a darker crayon. You can even outline the barn or the house. Remember, things don't have to look just like they look in real life. You've got great imagination, so you get to use your own ideas as you create your folk art landscape. So I hope you enjoyed making art today, and I look forward to making art with you again soon.